In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be joined by James Horncastle from BT Sport and The Athletic to talk all things Inter. We'll be reviewing the game against Udinese and the game against Pilsen, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com. Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I'm your host, Nima Ruzzari, wishing you back to an episode where I don't think it's going to be that much positivity, even though Inter did beat Viktoria Pilsen in the Champions League in a very comfortable way. But then things were anything but comfortable and nice against Udinese. But before we get to all of that, let me start by introducing my panelists, starting with SempreInter.com feature writer who pens a weekly column called 5 Things We Learned from Inter this week. Jake Smalley. I suspect, Jake, this week's column will not be that much positive. It won't be too positive this week, I suspect.
No, I might need Mo to read over it for me and add some positivity into it, to be honest with you. It's going to be a hard read. Whilst we're on the subject, James might be able to help us with this one. How do we pronounce Victoria? Is it Pilsen? They were calling it Plezenia on BT. I'm really struggling with this.
Wow. Yeah, I've always just said Pilsen.
Yeah, me too.
So, I mean, I've never been there. I don't know. I haven't asked to check. But yeah, the second pronunciation seemed wild.
Yes, I was.
But it is probably the right one. So go with that one, Jake.
Probably, and we are, and that is Mr. James Horncastle from BT Sport and The Athletic. How are you doing, James? Long time no speak. How's things?
Yeah, good. Great to chat to you all again. As you just said, could be in better days for your beloved Inter. We'll get to that soon enough.
We absolutely will. And we are joined by SempreInter.com preview writer who previews Inter's games and is our in-house Mr. Positivity. And this week is going to be tough for him because there's not that much positivity going about. Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Yeah, I'm very glum today, so happy to get into the podcast, but very little positivity on my end.
Alrighty then. Let's get to it then. James, I mean, we haven't been on the pod for almost a year. I mean, there's been so much that's happened. I'm keen to, I mean, if we discard the last season and the Radu Gate and all that stuff and everything that happened, then this summer, Inter on paper improved the squad in terms of depth. If we look at it player by player, Romelu Lukaku is a better player than Felipe Caicedo. Andre Onana is a better goalkeeper than Andre Radu. Francesco Acerbi is arguably better than Andrea Ranocchia. And Henrik Mkhitaryan and Cristian Aslani are better than Arturo Vidal and Mattias Vecino, at least in Simone Inzaghi's system. And Raul Bellanova as a backup and understudy to Denzel Dumfries is a good choice, in my opinion. And they got the replacement for Ivan Perisic in Robin Gosens in January. And even though if Robin Gosens is an improvement, he's not much of a weakness. So where are you on? I mean, what do you think about Inter summer to start there? I mean, yes, we know what happened with Dybala and Bremer and the complete, those 48 hours that were just horrible for Inter, where everything kind of fell apart. But where are you kind of looking? I mean, when you look at Inter's Mercato, what do you think about it?
I think it was a very unsettling summer in many regards because you were up for a week or so when you signed Lukaku and everyone thought that was impossible, but you did it. And simultaneously negotiations were going on with Paulo Dybala. And as you mentioned, when that collapsed, or, Inter, I think, weren't expecting to be able to bring Lukaku back. It was something that Lukaku wanted to do, but it then made signing Dybala impossible, really. I think that took some while to absorb. And all of a sudden, the way we were projecting how Inter's market would unfold, it never really materialized. It started with Lukaku. It felt like it was going to then go to Dybala, then go to Bremer, maybe even Milenkovic. And so I felt that, the way the window ended, it felt like a lot of Inter fans were not satisfied with it, that it had promised a lot and delivered relatively little, which, it's quite remarkable to say that when Lukaku is back at the club just a year after being sold for 115 million euro. But it doesn't feel like that. And it doesn't feel like that because Lukaku, hasn't been available for the last 4 league games. And you can understand him being in Belgium, rehabbing with his own kind of personal physio at sort of the Belgium training ground, with the World Cup in mind. He's not an Inter player. He's on loan at Inter from Chelsea, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the season unfolds with Lukaku, and whether he can pick up where he left off, and whether the situation at Chelsea has changed in a way now that there is a possibility he goes back and he plays for Chelsea, because there's been a change of manager there, which I think it does alter things. But just to go back to the squad, I look at Inter and I think Onana is someone who, that's a good signing on a free transfer. Someone who can either provide better competition with Handanovic or succeed Handanovic. You look at some of the signings on paper, like Aslani. This time last year, Aslani, as talented as he is, wasn't starting for Empoli. Samuele Ricci was, and everyone was talking about how good a player Ricci is. And it was only when Ricci was sold to Torino in January that Aslani got game time and started to play. So, we are going to see a bit more of Aslani, I would hope, over the coming weeks after the international break, because Brozovic has already got 5 yellow cards. I think we perhaps should have seen more of Aslani already, but we've only seen half an hour. And I wonder if that's because it's too much too soon for him right now. I think the same with Bellanova. I know Bellanova's had a full season playing in the second division with Pescara. I know he's played a full season with Cagliari. But I'm not convinced that he's ready now for a team like Inter. And so, watching the team at the moment, I feel like it's an old team. I feel like it's almost played together for too long now, and it needs refreshing. Now, it's kind of easy to say that when you look at, particularly what Napoli have done, where they got rid of Insigne, Kalidou Koulibaly, and Mertens, and kind of invigorated the team with the signings. But if you contrast the mood at Napoli at the beginning of the transfer window at Inter, it's completely different. Inter were euphoric. Napoli fans were depressed.
Completely depressed. I remember interviewing Vincenzo Credendino for the Italian Football Podcast, and he was talking. They were revolting. Like, they were absolutely fuming in the beginning of the window.
Yeah. So and that's completely changed. But there is a feeling that this Inter team is a bit stale, at the moment, because we saw this more or less the same group of players, give or take, Perisic, and we'll get to him, I imagine, in a few minutes. But it's the same team as last year, and yet the performances are way off. If you look at some of the goals that Inter are conceding, they're really worrying because, there are kind of repeat offenders in terms of, the Felipe Anderson's goal for Lazio. It comes from Milinkovic-Savic having all the time on the world on the ball. No one pressures him.
No.
And he plays the ball over the top, and Inter's defense is kind of scrambling for position, and they concede. If you watch the, I think it's the Leao goal, that is ultimately the winning goal in the Madrid. It's a Benacer long ball from out on the sideline that Giroud knocks down, and Leao, with that brilliant surfer-like ability that he has, then goes past the Inter centre-backs. But even the way the Inter centre-backs defended that long ball was poor. And then you watch the Bayern goal, the first one.
Same thing there.
Like Lautaro should be pressuring the ball, and instead he doesn't see the danger. They play a ball over the top, and Sané, we all know how quick Sané is. And at the weekend as well, Udinese deserved to win that game. Certainly as it became more stretched, I think we all felt that they were going to score, and they could score more. Deulofeu had hit the post. Handanovic had made a couple of saves from Lovric. But if you look at the final goal and the attitude of the players, I think there are two players over where Arslan is, who ultimately scores that third goal. And the really surprising one is Barella. Barella just isn't interested. Just either isn't paying attention or is too tired to kind of to care. And it's the sort of thing that I would think Antonio Conte would be going absolutely crazy about. And I wonder if Inzaghi is that kind of manager that can kind of instill that sort of mentality in this players, because I think this has been said before, but you see it at other clubs. After they've been coached within an inch of their lives by a really good manager, that mentality and the muscle memory kind of endures for a year, and then it can kind of wear off. And as much as Inzaghi brought something new to Inter last year, they played higher up the pitch, they had more of the ball, they were creating more chances. It does feel like A, something's gone stale, and B, maybe there is a bit of a hangover from last season, losing the title on the final day. And my last point on this is, the situation within the club itself, because you have Skriniar, who thinks all summer he's going to Paris Saint-Germain, not because he necessarily wants to. It's a great opportunity for him. He would make a lot more money, but it's because the club needed to sell him. And they wanted too much money. And now, the real risk is that he will do what Perisic did and leave on a free transfer, which is I think, disastrous.
Completely disastrous. Completely disastrous
for the club. You had Gosens, and the whole Gosens thing is just perplexing. I think when they signed him, people thought he would instantly take Perisic's place. Instead, Perisic rose to the competition and was Inter's best player in the second half of last season. And Gosens never got a look in. And whether the injury that he had against Atalanta, when he was at Atalanta, has really been damaging, and whether he's one of those Atalanta players who comes out of a system that is Gasperiniano, goes into another one and it's not the same. I don't know, but Inter are playing with Darmian every week as left wing back, and Darmian is a very good squad player and a very good team player. He came up with some clutch goals in Conte's Scudetto winning season. Yeah, but if Darmian is going to be your guy in what was a really key position for Inter last year, that's a problem. And yet, Gosens had this offer on the final few days of the window. And, I remember that. I can't remember who they played, but Çalhanoğlu was in a post-match interview and they said, Gosens is going to Leverkusen. And he was like, what?
I remember that. Yeah.
And I just think that whole, and I think you can see this with Juventus as well, because I think when after year one of Cristiano, it was clear that they didn't win the Champions League, and they had to make money in the transfer market. They had to bring in money in the transfer market, and all of a sudden it felt like everybody at Juventus was for sale. And I think gradually the kind of winning enamel of that team, that sense of belonging, which Italians always say is so important as a component to a winning team and winning environment, began to dissolve. And I think that's kind of what's happening with Inter, where you seem to go from week to week. I remember the first weeks of the transfer window, it's like, is Bastoni staying? Are Spurs going to sign him? And you've got his agent coming in and out of the headquarters saying, no, he's staying, blah, blah, blah. You've got the Skriniar thing that goes on for ages. You've got Dumfries. Is Dumfries going to be a bargaining piece with Chelsea for Lukaku, or is he going to be sold separately? And I think all of these things are destabilizing. And
absolutely.
And players think, well, how long are we going to be here? As I said at the top of that point, the idea of losing a player as valuable as Skriniar for free, so a year after losing Perisic for free, for a club that is in the position that it's in, is really, really inexcusable.
I think, I don't know a single Inter fan that wouldn't disagree with that. And Suning are at the heart of that. And Steven Zhang is at the heart of that. And he doesn't seem to offer much of anything other than drive a new car to the Inter HQ and say stupid things whenever he speaks, which mean absolutely nothing. And it's quite obvious that he absolutely is just, he doesn't have, he's not the one who decides. Suning are essentially just, the Zhang family don't really control all of Suning anymore, as the Chinese government has gone in and saved them. And with the clock ticking with Oaktree, the loan that has to be repaid by 2024. And will they be able to do that? Well, they were talking about, 60 million plus the plus last year. You can add up, but then also we also know that you can't take money out that way as an owner, because it's not Inter who've borrowed that money. It's Great Horizon, which is the company that owns Inter, using Inter as collateral, that have loaned that money. So there is that, and I agree with that. This is why I think that I will always be grateful to what Suning have done, taking a club that was never, taking them into the 21st century, but that they've reached the ceiling and they can't take this club any further. And I think this summer proves that just proves that. Just exactly proves that they can't sell any players until Pinamonti goes for whatever, around 15-20 million. Casadei goes for around 20 million, including add-ons. And then you have the Gregorio deal, which was made the year before, Gravilon as well. And clubs know that Inter are in a weak position, so they're going to drag it out. And that also hurts Inter. This is just not a way to run a football club. But we'll see. I still don't think that anything will happen. I don't think Suning will leave until or sell until two things. First, the fate of the European Court of Justice ruling on the European Super League is decided. And secondly, once the council has, the Milan City Council have decided what will happen with this, with a new stadium. I think once those two things are decided, then we'll see Suning leave, because both of those two things will raise the value of the club. And I think then we can talk about reaching the level at which the evaluation reaches the level that Suning wanted to, at least close by. But, clock is ticking. We'll see. I want to talk about the football too. I personally always thought that Paulo Dybala, given how Inzaghi wants to play, I think Paulo Dybala suits Inter more than Romelu Lukaku does. I mean, the Simone Inzaghi Inter, anyway. And I think I wanted to hear your points, or hear your thoughts on this as well, because the way I see it is Simone Inzaghi prepared a preseason where he was going to play with a higher defensive line, where Skriniar was leaving, De Vrij was leaving, and the replacements were going to be Milenkovic and Bremer. I mean, he even came out and said that pretty much before the friendly against Lugano. We're going to buy a central defender, and then they didn't end up buying a central defender, and they made him look like an idiot. And I think he prepared for that, to play with a higher line, which in turn means that the midfield will be pressing higher up. And if you have Dybala and Lautaro, you'll be pressing higher up as well. I think all of that went out the window. Without Dybala, no Bremer, no Milenkovic. He had to beg on his hands and knees, Simone Inzaghi, to get Francesco Acerbi to replace Andrea Ranocchia. And since then, I look at it as him lowering the defensive line, but the midfield is confused. And the attack as well, that, like you said, why isn't Lautaro and Barella pressing, or Brozovic, etc., etc. And I think they have. I think the tactical confusion is there. Then you also have the Stefan de Vrij, who's it's the Handanovic, it's Handanovic 2.0. I was worried about this when about a year and a half ago. That are we seeing a decline? And I mentioned it after the derby defeat against Giroud, when Giroud. Si gira Giroud, when you get turned by Olivier Giroud, then questions need to be asked. I mean, the man's is quick. I mean, he has the a turning radius of a refrigerator from 1955, so he doesn't exactly go quickly. So all of these things together is where I stand with this, and I think it's a bit of a perfect storm. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that, both the Dybala thing, the De Vrij thing, and also the tactical aspect of playing with a higher defensive line and players not coming and now moving it down again.
I would have been curious to see Dybala play with Dzeko. I think there are a couple of things. I mean, often last season, Lautaro liked to come short into the areas that Dzeko likes to come short and play in, and they're both, they're both players who like to be involved. They like touches. I wonder with Dybala whether this would be a bit of an issue. Just because Dybala likes to play. Sort of in that kind of right half space, play off a striker, come short, add an additional midfield player in the build-up. And I just wonder how that would kind of work, within this setup. Because again, I think what Allegri was quite astute at seeing with Dybala, and I think it's something that Mourinho sees as well, is that he's a player who is often very good when you give him lots of space in front of him, and you give him if you play in a deep block and you have a quick combination, he's got the kind of aerobic ability to kind of run with the ball, jink past players. And I'm not sure that's what kind of Inter setup was going to be this year. I always just thought that Dybala would have been an extravagance really for them. And I look at it the same with Lukaku. Like, I thought what was really good with Conte was, Conte understood Lukaku probably like no one else, apart from maybe some of Roberto Martinez and Steve Clark, West, all like-minded coaches. But he would play with a low block. They'd often play through the press, and they would have a quick combination, sort of. With this sort of pulley mechanism of one coming short, the other going in profondità, and it worked really well. And they had Hakimi, and Lukaku's great at having lots of wide space, running at defences. He scored those ludicrous goals where he'd essentially carry the ball from the halfway line, which made Serie A look really stupid, I thought, a lot of the time. I just think now, with the way that Inzaghi was playing last year, with this kind of higher line possession based system, I wonder, does Lukaku fit into that? Can he be as good in that different interpretation of the same system as he was with Conte? I don't know, and I have some of the same feeling with Dybala as well. So there's that. Some of the observations that I have this season. Yeah, the one it's not really de Vrij. I think even de Vrij for me at 31. Okay, he's had a few bad games. He hasn't always looked fit, and but I still think if he's healthy and he's composed, he's certainly a good guy to have there. My sort of issue really is, not an issue, but the thing I'm alarmed by is Bastoni this year.
Mm.
Bastoni, I don't know what's happening with Bastoni, because I think he is, the best young Italian centre back out there. He's not a Rugani, he's not a Romagnoli. He wasn't, kind of declared too good too soon. He's shown he is very, very good. But this year he doesn't bring the ball out anymore. He doesn't join in attacks. This is the thing that Bastoni does. He creates numerical superiority high up the pitch, and he's not doing that. And I don't understand why. I don't know whether it's an instruction from the coach. I don't know whether it's because he's lacking fitness. And I can imagine it's quite frustrating because we've seen Di Marco play left centre back sometimes this year. And we saw Bastoni's reaction to being subbed for after half an hour for being on a booking at the weekend, and I think that's the kind of thing that just compounds what must be a very frustrating start to the season. And so I think that is an aspect that is not being getting the kind of attention that it merits. I think it also means Brozovic is more exposed. Brozovic is not as clean a passer as he was last season. He's given the ball away more this year. He's still come up big, his goal in the Derby della Madonnina, the opener. It's just a shame that they couldn't stop Milan from scoring. Incidentally, in that game, Mike Maignan was Milan's best player. Inter had 20-minute blackout. But they still created enough chances to get a point out of that game or something out of that game. Brozovic scored that late winner against Torino, but I do think without having a centre-back who's going to step out and get forward in the way Bastoni and Skriniar did, it's kind of easier to hunt for them.
But my issue with de Vrij is that I see a clear decline. In the derby, he played like a school child.
I think all three of them did. And this is the worrying thing for me is Skriniar, what's his body position on that second Bayern goal? Where And again, I think he's probably unlucky in the first goal against Udinese. Two of the three goals against Udinese are set pieces, but it kind of comes off him. And and then again, I think these guys aren't getting a lot of help from the midfield.
No, they're not.
And I mentioned the Barella on the third Udinese goal. If you look at the Giroud goal in the Madonnina, Barella runs across to Leao and the ball goes through his legs. You can then kind of look at the guys in the box and say, why is Giroud in so much space? Çalhanoğlu, what are you doing? Or why isn't the defender stepping up? And that's the other thing that I just find baffling about Inter. They stand off teams.
Yeah, they don't press. There's no pressing.
It's incredible. It's incredible how they stand off and I don't know whether it's like a it's a tiredness thing, or I mean, we're only 9 games into the season, with Champions League. And I think this then goes back to my point about this group of players being, needing freshening up. And yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty concerning. And I mean, the other thing is Vidal, as much as he was like turned into a bit of a joke figure, he was earning a ridiculous salary. I think Vidal was readier to come off the bench than some of these other guys, and the same goes for Alexis Sanchez. Alexis, for me, as much as he was, "Oye, chicos," sort of sort out his payoff. I mean, people forget what a great, highly played option he was off the bench. I mean, he scores the winner in the last kick of the game in the Super Cup. I think he had 25 goals and assists in his time at Inter, and he's just a more dependable, decisive player, match winner than Correa, or
Don't get me started on Correa.
So I think they've brought in, I mean, even like signing Acerbi, okay, like I know Acerbi is someone Inzaghi knows. When Chiellini was out injured for a year, he was the guy partnering Bonucci for the national team. I think all the stuff that went on between him and the Lazio Ultras ultimately made his kind of time there. It was untenable. But he was a good player, but he's an old player. And again, the team, as much as you can look at Aslani and Bellanova, the team gets older, or the team is the same. But it's the same without the good guys. There are obviously still some very good players at Inter, but the Perisic's, the Ericssons, the Hakimis, and I think in Italy they always talk about the if you pull the cover too far up, your feet get cold. I think we're seeing this with Inter now, and that's and you've got a manager who deserved to get that job. I think had a good first season. Okay, they don't retain their title, but there were some really good moments in there, and ultimately they had so many match points to win that season. It's kind of maddening that they didn't win it. Lautaro missing the penalty in the first Madonnina.
Yep.
Di Marco missing the penalty against Atalanta. The Radu mistake. If they're 1-0 up and in control in the second Madonnina, they're 7 points clear.
Yeah.
They were good enough to be in that position. I think that meant. I think it's just now that there is. Now that there's that, they are a year older, and another difference maker's gone, and we're yet to see what Lukaku brings beyond the tap in against Lecce. It is quite concerning, and and the manager has got to show in his second season that he can improve himself, B, that he learned the mistakes from last year, and I think that's the thing that's probably been a bit of a source of dissatisfaction amongst Inter fans, to see putting Gagliardini on Milinkovic-Savic in the Lazio game.
To be fair, that was Conte's Frankenstein monster that he created. The Gagliardini is good at neutralizing Sergei Milinkovic-Savic. That's not an invention. That's not an Inzaghi invention. That's a Conte invention. It's annoying, but it's an invention.
It worked for Conte.
Yeah.
Why can't Inzaghi make it work for him? And that makes me think, okay, there's a difference between Conte and Inzaghi. And as I said, as much as Inzaghi is a very good coach, who deserve to be where he is. There are too many occasions this season and last where you question the manager's decisions. And, you know, I mean, he referred to it to himself when, you know, Inter kind of got themselves back in the title race. We spent 2 or 3 months discussing my substitutions. And it's like, well, yeah. You know, and it wasn't without justification. So there's so much going on with Inter that, you know, it's amazing how you start the season and the broad consensus is Inter have got the most talented squad, or Juventus have got the most talented squad, and yet there's dysfunction in both of those clubs. That is, it seems to be kind of putting a brake on the talent that is available to them. And you know, we're seeing clubs take advantage of it. Milan took advantage of it last season. You know, maybe Napoli, maybe Atalanta, maybe Milan again taking advantage of it this season. We'll have to see.
Right, I'm gonna hand you over to Mo and then Jake. Mo, if you have the question for James, go right ahead.
Yeah, James, thank you very much for this very long session where you have really aired out everything, all the grievances that Interisti have, and like. I always really enjoy your analyses, man. It's the sense of dysfunction is very palpable. My question to you would be then, you know, what next? Now you're Marotta. What do you do? I mean, there's a lot of, unsurprisingly, a lot of talk of Inzaghi out. You know, maybe not. Inzaghi out. But who next? But also, even if we keep Inzaghi to the end of the season, which, you know, I would be inclined to believe is the right thing to do anyway, what next? Do you then assess Inzaghi's progress and see if he's the right manager moving on, or do you think that a big part of the freshening up is that you know, Inzaghi rightfully got the job, like you say, and then wasn't able to really step up to the plate when it mattered, and we find someone else on the market? So yeah, that's my question to you.
Thanks, Mo. Look, I think it's tricky. If I'm Marotta, I'm thinking, you know, what else is there to do in this project? You know, I mean, yeah, when Inter won the league with Conte, it was about keeping Conte. They couldn't keep Conte. And then it was like, okay, we'll get Inzaghi, and you know, our objective is still the same. It's the second star. Let's get the 20th Scudetto. And you look at it and you think, well, what are our prospects of doing that now? You know, it'd be great to actually, I'm going to say, go out on that, because, you know, I think Marotta probably, I don't think there's another big club job in there for him, but I could see him becoming either a president of Serie A or president of the FIGC at some stage. In terms of like short term, like, I mean, it's an interesting season. You know, we're going to have, I would say, quite a high pressure start to this run into the World Cup, because Inter play Roma when the international break ends, and then there's the double header against Barcelona, which is going to be interesting. I mean, I think, you know, there are parts of the Bayern game where Inter played well and looked like they could have got something out of that, but it didn't really feel in step with what we saw from Inter in the big Champions League games last season. I think the problem is that, and I wrote this about Juventus today on The Athletic, is that if you're a big Italian club like Inter and Juve, you know, that has been kind of hit by COVID, you're making huge losses. You've given, in Allegri's case, he's got, I mean, pretty much 3 years left on his deal. Inzaghi signed a new contract at the end of last season. I mean, can say is justified in getting that new deal on the back of doing the double and getting the club out of the Champions League group stage is for the first time in a long time. But the reason why kind of fans are looking at this and saying, come on, we need to get rid of the manager, otherwise we're going to miss out on the Champions League, is we can't afford to miss out on the Champions League. I mean, it just goes to show how outside of the Premier League and outside, let's say Bayern Munich, the way European football is formatted is really dysfunctional, because it's like you have to spend money, i.e. sack Allegri, sack Inzaghi, hire a new guy who you guys are all going to be happy with.
No. I want Inzaghi to stay. I'm not on that train at all.
Okay. So my broader point is you're going to have to spend money in order not to lose money. Okay. Which how is that sustainable? That isn't that is not how any other industry works. It's mad, and that's why I am in some respects pro European football reform, pro a new model, whether that's a Super League, Continental Super League, whatever. Because honestly, it can't go on like this.
No.
How we can spend 45 minutes discussing Inzaghi's substitutions, Inter's recruitment, Suning. The way the whole thing is set up is makes sustainability very difficult. And so I would think that the inclination is kind of what Neiman's just alluded to his own feeling is that Inzaghi, you have to make it work with Inzaghi. You have to make it work until, and you have to believe that he's good enough and this team is good enough to get into the Champions League. And then you can make a decision in the summer. And I think it's exactly the same with Allegri, because the idea of having to spend money in order not to lose money for clubs ultimately Juventus are guaranteed by their shareholders, who are in a much better position than Inter are with Suning. But ultimately, if you're looking at it, I think it's a decision that they would be extremely reluctant to make, to sack a manager at this moment in time. And to be honest, like if they were to do that, I look around and off the top of my head, I think who would come in?
That's the thing, though. People saying, bringing Thomas Tuchel. Okay, so what are you going to do with Romelu Lukaku? He's going to literally be on the same train. He's going to be on the same flight that takes Tuchel to Milan, on that flight on the way out. I mean, there's no logic. That
would be really funny.
I mean, it would it's not funny at all. It's horrible, James. Stop it! You're giving me a panic attack. Seriously, it's like there's no. I mean, sacking the manager for me is one of those things. I understand more if people want to get rid of Allegri at Juve, because he's actually gotten the players he wants. Simone Inzaghi. I mean, even if you look at net transfers, what was it? Plus 140 last summer. Yeah. And barely anything this summer. This guy's not been backed. I mean, this is one of the reasons which I was very critical of Antonio Conte, because it cost too much. You spent your club record, you broke it twice to bring in two fantastic players, but you also paid him 12 million euros net a season. You couldn't afford it, and now you're kind of trying to make it work after a pandemic, which was dreadful. And so it feels a little bit like you sold your soul for one Scudetto. And because, we have a saying in Swedish that, look, everyone's king of the bar on payday, but then but the bill has to be paid, and the bills come now. And everyone's looking at each other. Well, I didn't have that beer. I didn't have that. It's ridiculous. It's not sustainable. And I know for a fact that Suning worked hard to make Inter sustainable. I know for a fact I've spoken to people who, at the club and maybe not there anymore, who spoke about the work they did to fix the finances. And they got carried away with Conte. I mean, they did. They couldn't afford it. The same way that Juve couldn't afford Cristiano Ronaldo, and that came crashing down. Inter couldn't afford Antonio Conte and everything that they spent on him. And now they're kind of left financially. Okay, the pandemic helped. The geopolitical tensions between China and the West have definitely added to this, because China's no longer even investing in football anymore. Their own domestic Chinese Super League just completely fell apart. They don't want capital leaving the country, etc. But that's all true. But at the same time, there are no shortcuts. And I wonder if it's a little bit like that. I mean, that's how I see it anyway, a little bit. And I wonder what you think. And then I want to go to Jake.
No, totally. I think they did get carried away. But I mean, on the one hand, if you hire Conte, you know that he's going to push you to back him. And
that was very diplomatic.
And and likewise, Inzaghi knew what he was getting into. I mean, he didn't expect them to sell Lukaku, but he knew that they had to make ends meet in such a way. I think he has got some players that he's wanted. Acerbi, Correa, I mean, the Lazioification of Inter, at least there are a couple of bits there. So yeah, I mean, look, I look at the guys who are available. De Zerbi is no longer available. But, I mean, you're talking, if you look at the guys on the market, Zidane, no, Zidane will wait and see what happens with France, and he's probably way too expensive for Inter. Tuchel, Pochettino, I mean, these guys have either been, I mean, both of them have taken Paris Saint-Germain money recently. They've worked in the Premier League. They're going to have high salary demands in the event a club like Inter is looking for a new manager. So I think it's pretty tricky to go and find someone. Bring back Claudio Ranieri. Remember the Ranieri?
Oh my God! Don't.
Yeah. Sorry, Mo. That's yeah. I think they find a way to make it work and stick with it.
Right, Jake.
I'd say we.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, sorry. Go ahead, Jake. No. Sorry. Let Jake go in.
Jake, did you have a question for James? And then the floor is yours.
I did, and then he answered two of the questions that I'd already prepared. So I've had to think of one a little bit off the top of it. Well, before I actually ask my question, I can't believe no one's mentioned Walter Mazzarri there as a potential.
Please stop. Please stop.
Sorry. No, I was going to ask about Robin Gosens, and you kind of answered that for me because I was a bit irritated by the whole situation. And then I was going to ask you a bit about Lukaku, and then you sort of answered what I was going to ask you anyway. But I wanted to sort of go on a bit more of a positive note, and I wanted to ask you about Lautaro Martinez. In my opinion, this season he's gone up another level. He's shown a little bit more. Well, more so his game seems to have developed over the summer. It looks a bit more of a goal threat. Where do you see his ceiling this season?
I think Lautaro, he has been Inter's best player this season. I think he's had to take on more responsibility for a couple of reasons. He wanted that extension, he got it. He was very clear that he wanted to stay in Milan, and I think he's showing that. I think that he feels like he has to show it. It's a World Cup year, and I think he absolutely wants to be starting striker for Argentina, and takes that really seriously. And I also think he's had to kind of step up because for the kind of structural issues with the team that we've discussed so far this season, not having a Perisic, you're coping with Darmian. Barella had that great assist for Brozovic against Torino, scored that free kick at the weekend. But, Barella hasn't really been up to the same standard that he showed this time last year. So Lautaro's had to kind of grab games by the scruff of the neck. I was really impressed with, what he did in that first goal in the Milan derby, where he knew how to get the better of Kalulu, and hardly anybody gets the better of Kalulu, by pinning him and not allowing him to stand off him and have that extra yard of pace to make sure he just snuffs Lautaro out. So I would like to see Lautaro fight for the Capocannoniere this season, because it's not something that he's really come close to either, because Immobile always scores 36 goals or whatever. But I kind of want the La to be more important than the Lou this season. Because I think this is, he does step up in big games, Lautaro, and I just think this feels like it could be his year to really. He's already a Scudetto and he's won everything there is to win domestically now. But I think he can really stamp his authority on this team. And yeah, I just, but at the same time, I don't want him to have such a good season where, come next summer he'll be the next guy on the Premier League shopping list, or the one that Suning basically decide, okay, right, it's time to make a sacrifice. Because if Lukaku hadn't gone to Chelsea, he would have gone to Tottenham. So it's I don't know, it's kind of bittersweet, but I do think he's as much as the body language of some of the Inter players has been off this season, his hasn't. And I think and he's had to play with so many different partners this year. He plays with Correa one week, he plays with Dzeko the next, he plays with Lukaku. That's not easy. And I think he's shown he can still deliver doing that. So yeah, it'd be good to see. It'd be good to see an Argentine win the Capocannoniere.
So you're saying Lautaro, and I couldn't agree with you more, because I think what we saw, I never thought Lautaro could become a killer in the box. I always looked at him more as a 9.5 and a seconda punta more than a prima punta. But I think from March onwards, when he's turned into this killer, and he's becoming, now that his physique and physically, that goal in the derby for Brozovic, when he's turned into a physical monster, when he can hold off defenders with his strength, and also the goal he scored against I think Cremonese. He looks better than he's ever been. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think he'll score more than Lukaku, but I don't see him being a Capocannoniere. I hope you're right. Before we let you go, I want to have your top 6, 1 to 6, in the Serie A predictions.
I hate doing this.
Yeah, I know, but you don't need to like explain why. You can just list them 1 to 6.
Okay. Napoli.
That's my dark horse, by the way.
Yeah. Are Napoli a dark horse anymore? I'm not sure they are. I think they're
not for the Serie A title. I think they are, because Spalletti hasn't ever won anything important, and Napoli hasn't won anything since. Well,
league Zenit. Yeah, it took Mourinho 14 years to win a trophy. Yeah, Spalletti won things with Roma when he was way undermatched. Against. Yeah. He's a brilliant coach. Again,
no, I think so as well. I think in terms of individual development of players, he's unbelievable. From Brozovic to Lobotka to, we've seen it all the time. So I'm with you on that.
Okay, Napoli, Milan, Atalanta.
Oh.
Inter.
No Champions League for Juve. Okay.
Well, you said no particular order, right?
Okay. No. I meant from 1 to 6. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna finish second, third, fourth? Come on.
No, I think this is the year that you fall out of the Champions League.
Okay.
Look, this time last year, we were all saying that, and they went on a very good run between November and March, where they even got themselves in the title conversation.
Yeah.
And people were getting excited. So yeah, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. I just think their strategy is kind of quite interesting. You sign Pogba when you know that Pogba, his last few seasons at Manchester United, it was difficult to get him on the pitch and get him fit and get him at his best. Di Maria is the age Di Maria is. So, they've got a lot of things to sort out there.
Fair enough.
Roma.
So Napoli, Milan, Atalanta, Inter, Juve, and Roma, or Roma before Juve?
Roma before Juve.
Oh, your Roma. Oh, if Allegri finishes sixth, there will be. Oh dear. I might have to move over to the UK and personally mend to my colleague on the pod, Carlo Garganese, because he might just absolutely blow a fuse if you end up finishing sixth. Okay. Well, I hope you. I mean, I'd rather Napoli win it than Milan win it. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, other than that, I hope you're wrong and that Inter can come back. I really do, but it doesn't look like it. Thank you so much for coming on, James. I really appreciate this. And before we let you go, have you got anything coming up? Because I'm sure you have. So if there's anything you've got coming up that you can speak about and plug, then feel free.
I've got a big read on De Zerbi coming out tomorrow with my colleague who covers Brighton. Just kind of introduction to De Zerbismo. And what else am I doing? There's obviously Nations League. I'm bizarrely, because Italy are no longer a team that goes to World Cups, I have been told I will be covering Brazil at the World Cup.
Nice.
I'm going to Paris to watch Brazil's 2 friendlies in the next few weeks. So yeah, I'm kind of doing stuff around the World Cup and around Brazil, really, which is not my usual beat, but at the same time, something I'm quite excited by. So yeah.
Definitely. Check out James's work on The Athletic and BT Sports if you live in the UK for Golazzo Live together with James Richardson. And follow James on Twitter on is it Horncastle only, or is it James Horncastle?
Oh, it's James Horncastle. Yeah.
Thank you so much, James. Good to have you on. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Nima. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Mo.
Take care, James.
Yeah. Take care, guys.
Right. Let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football, starting with the positivity. This week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mohamed Nasser.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yet again, it's slim pickings. I mean, honestly, guys, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of true. My Moratti of the week is international break. As much as last season's international break, right before the end of the season, I believe, hampered our chances of winning a Scudetto. I don't think this international break could come early enough for Inzaghi and the management and the squad and everyone. So I'm very happy that we don't have to play again to post the Europa League or whatever it's called, the Nations League thing. And yeah, let's see. Hopefully it's a good reset for everyone, and we come back with our heads screwed on properly.
Amen, Mo. Couldn't agree more. Right, let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which I'll be presenting myself. Literally the entire situation at Inter, from Suning's, the financial diktat from them, to Milan Skriniar's contract not being signed before the summer, his contract extension not sorted out before the summer, to the Samir Handanovic situation and Andre Onana not replacing him, to Stefan de Vrij, who I think is a huge problem, and I don't want to see play for Inter ever again, because I don't think he's good enough, and he keeps showing it. He gets turned by mid-table Serie A players now. Watch the Udinese game for the second goal, and you see what I mean. To the entire atmosphere around the club right now, from the fans being pissed off, rightfully, to literally not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel until a new buyer comes. And I've got an exclusive on this coming up. It's I'm not going to say too much on this, so it's going to come up over the next couple of days about about a rumored interest from someone from a conglomerate to buy Inter, which I know it's not going to be them, but yeah, no, it's not nice. It's absolutely not nice. And the situation at Inter is this week's Moggi. All of it, every single every single part of it is this week's Moggi. It's absolutely depressing. Right, let's move on to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which will be presented by Mr. Jake Smalley.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
I feel like I've almost set the bar a little too high in recent weeks with some of my recent comments. And this week's been a little bit of a harder week to sort of salvage anything that's been quite fun, with the world perhaps being a bit of a flat place with certain events happening. So one thing that I found this week is something that no doubt a lot of people will have seen doing around on social media. A referee during a game in the Czech Republic, in Serbia, in fact, that's me thinking about Victoria Pilsen again, probably to my head. A game in Serbia where the referee checked a supporter's phone to almost VAR a decision and overturn what he had seen.
No, you're making this can't be true. No, this can't be true. No, you're making it up, mate. There's no way.
I promise you, I've not been on the dark web again. No, it's no, it's true. Support on the touchline, videoing a key moment in that. The referee walks over and checks.
This isn't true. This can't be true.
I'm afraid it is.
Oh my god. Which league is it? Like, which is it? First, second? Like, what tier is it? And who's playing? And what happened? What was the decision?
The article that I found only describes it as being a lower league German football. It's to disallow a goal. So a referee from a lower league Serbian side has gone viral for he overturned his decision to disallow a goal thanks to a fan's homemade VAR on his phone. It looks as if a little bit like the manager of the opposing side is the one who set this up a little bit as well, watching the clip. So the referee had originally decided to disallow a goal after the team in blue had hit home a goal from a free kick, but the player had looked onside. After many complaints from the team and no doubt the fans, the official went over to the fans to see what all the fuss was about. One of the crowd had clearly been recording the goal, and it was clear that the goal was in fact offside, leading to incredible scenes from the players.
Well, duh.
Apparently VAR is now available on the Google Play Store.
I mean, I don't even know what I've no words for that. No, this is fantastic. This is what I mean. You find the best things. Like this is fantastic, Jake. Absolutely fantastic. That is amazing. There's just off the top of my head, there's so many violations going on there at once that I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, no, well done, man. Brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. Well done. That is a fantastic Frog. Right, that's all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank James Horncastle for coming on, and Mo, he had to rush off. And I'd like to thank you, Jake. And when can we expect your piece to be ready by this week, when people can read it?
Well, I'm hoping to have the finishing touches done as soon as we finish recording, really. So hopefully, maybe sort of Tuesday. Yeah, we're on Tuesday tomorrow. I'm thrown by the bank holiday. I keep thinking it's Sunday in my head today. It's absolutely thrown me this extra day.
Mm. Well, I mean, it's a bank holiday because of the Queen's funeral, right? Yeah. Or is it something else? Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
So
I'm just wondering. No, just clarifying that for everyone who doesn't live in the UK and doesn't know. Right. So thanks for that, Jake. That's brilliant. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it once again.
Until next week, I hope you all have. I hope you all have a nice international break. If your national team is playing, I hope they win. And take care of yourselves. And remember, sempre e solo forza Inter.